likely. Yesterday, this is what I remember right here, right? So this is the range that we gave for US 10 yesterday, 4.18. Oh, it's testing 4.08. That's not 4.18. Right. So yesterday we gave it a range between 4.18 to 4.22. That's the range, right? And I still think that it's going to go there at some point in time. Very likely that's going to happen. And this chart is still intact here. 5 is testing, and very likely it's going to go hit this number 4.09. And very likely, I think it's going to take a breather either right here where it is testing the second standard deviation, or probably at 4.09. Very likely it'll take a breather. How deep of a breather? I don't know. Probably the breather might pull it down into again of 3.99. Uh, could be possibly. I don't know that yet. And looking at DXY chart, yeah. So the upside, very likely it's gonna go hit this 104.30. This is where I was getting from my 104.30 from. That clears, it's gonna go hit this number 105.60 area, right? And the same thing on the DXY as well. On the weekly, it's gonna go test this mean again at 105.30. Weekly mean. And if that clears, very likely the weekly 50 at 104.60 area, right? So this is the idea for DXY. If it clears there, then we'll start to reassess the whole thing, and probably if I extend this line here, then 105.77, then very likely it's going to push all the way up here into 106.38. So I think this, if it clears the mean, then very likely it's going to go hit this number, and very likely it's going to take a breather there. But if it does come back up and clear the 50 moving average, then we'll start to reassess pricing in further upside. If not, we'll just take it easy and we'll start looking for a bounce. And there you go. As we speak, it's happening. Now the bounce. Why didn't I? Why am I saying bounce? Because of this guy, right? 1 year chart is oversold, clearly oversold. And Apple was expected to hit this number right here, the mean on the week, and bounce. And this is what I was counting on, and I think that's the note I put out there. Apple hit the mean and started to bounce. Now, how much of a bounce? Well, that probably can go here and look at that. Probably it's going to come back here, 144.28. Then very likely it's going to go up here into 144.60 to 144.70. That clears, we'll start to reassess the whole thing into this 50 moving average here, about 145.30 area, right? So because of this Apple bounce from a lower time frame, which is a 1 hour time frame, it is getting oversold, and very likely we're going to see a bounce 5 and 8. And particularly if you're trading this bounce, I would encourage you to look at the lower time frames, the 5 and the 8, right? It could get rejected at the 5 or the 8, so be aware of this stuff. Cool. And U.S. oil is moving higher. That's another good thing. That means the oil traders are still expecting the demand to continue. So that's happening there. Right now, let's see here. The lower time frame, if it comes up and clears the 8 here at 39.37 area, then we'll reassess right about here, 39.38. That clears, then very likely we are going to go here. And if, yeah, 39.38 clears, then right here 39.40, and the mean reversion here at 39.43, and the dots are right here at about 39.48. That's the upside, 39.48 area. If it clears there, then let's start to reassess the whole thing into 39.60. Let's go here on this chart. Yeah, this chart is it's a little bit unclear. Why? Because not unclear, but still, I would exercise caution. Both ways actually, upside, downside, very opportunistic trades. Why? Because this thing is still pointing to the downside. This thing is still crossed to the downside. So this thing will start to keep it pulling to the downside. However, you can see that the RSI here is at the bottom, so we might expect a bounce, right? The trigger RSI might trigger a bounce here, and also SMI is all the way down here, so it might trigger another bounce like it did yesterday. Now to the downside, if it starts to breach right about here, the 50 moving average, or breaks the lows on this chart, right? So this is the chart. I don't know. Oh boy, I'm getting some sort of a pain. Right. So the lower inner Bollinger Band on the week, this is what the thesis says, right? If it hits the mean, and very likely it's going to come back down into the lower inner Bollinger Band, that's where it is doing, and that's where it is getting its bounce from. However, if you look at the Heikin-Ashi candles, it hasn't tested that lower inner Bollinger Band. Might get to see that 3916 area, and that is also in line with this line, right? 3915, 3916, and then you have another super trend here at 3913 area. So we want to see this thing get tested, and then we want to see another bounce. Now let's say if it bounces right about here, right, without going further down, without testing these numbers, let's say it bounces here. So how do you gauge that? Of course, we want to see Apple, where Apple is going, and based on that, you can expect it to come back into this line right here. And if 3936 clears, then 3938 on the lower time frame, very likely I would want to see this number get tested, the 200 moving average, 3949, right? So that's about a good 15, 16 points from where we are now. Let's round that up at 3950, right? So basically, a 200 moving average on the day for ES, that's the upside, and definitely not plotting anything above that as of now. If it breaches, then we'll start to reassess, further upside. But as of now, I don't think it's going to breach that. And possibly it might go and touch that number because Apple is oversold and it is hitting the mean on the week. So we might see that bounce, and that bounce very well could last into that 200 moving average to the upside. So the whole game here is the 200 moving day to the upside, 3950 area. So subtract 5 points from this, so you will get at about 3945 for SPX, and to the downside, right about here, 3914, 3915 area. So subtract about. I think if ES comes down to this 3915, that means SPX is coming down to 3910 or the 39 um, yeah 3910 to 3909, that area. And I think very likely because of 39 if it comes down to, let's say, 3910, very likely the psychological level 3900 will get tested, right? But we'll reassess as we get further into the trading. So yeah, by and large, this is the range that we want to see it play out today. So that's about another, what, 35 points range, right? uh, 35 points range, and probably if you expand that range to, let's say, 3,000 to the downside, that would be about 50 points range. So that if you say it's 50 points range, then probably you're looking for another 30 points here, right? So 30 points for the downside, and probably you're looking at 16 points upside. Right, yeah. That's how I'm looking at things right now. Cool. Let's get into Apple. Apple, I think we discussed it, but so here is the Apple chart, the weekly. This is where it is bouncing, and I think if it breaches the mean, then it's going to go hit this number, 143.20 area. If that breaches, very likely it's going to come back down into this number right about here, 142, 142.50. That breaches, we'll start to reassess the 50 moving average on the day for Apple, 140.60, 140 area, right? And then let's see how it goes. I don't know if it's going to come all the way down here into 140.70 today, but it's just about 3 points from where it is, and Apple's ATR is permitting that, especially with MACD doing this, right? So again, the same scenario, just like yesterday. It is all the way down here. We might get in bounce. I would still think that would be an ephemeral bounce. Why? Because this thing is still crossed to the downside. And again, I'll be watching for SMI on the lower time frame. If the SMI starts to curl to the upside, and we'll again start to see this thing hit the 5, hit the 8, and start to take a breather. Mean as of now is sitting all the way up here at 146.14. As of now, it seems like a hard ask. So unless unless the hourly 8 gets taken, to the upside, unless the 8 is breached to the upside on the hour, no, I'm not really looking for mean reversion as of now. Things could change because this is still oversold conditions. It might give us a bounce today, ephemeral bounce, or it might actually wait for tomorrow to make that bounce, right? We don't know yet because the sentiment is still negative, and the second thing is that US 10 is still moving high, right? It is moving down from where it was, but it is still high. The idea here is that US 10 will reach 4 and above 4.05 or something around that, and then you will have ES very close to our sorry SPX close to 3900. So that's how the math played out perfectly. And option traders, if you held longer dated puts, you would have come out looking good on that trade. But if you held shorter dated puts, then probably there was some bounces along the way, so that might not have been that good of a trade. However, the other trade was SQs or SPXS or TNA, so those should have worked out really, real good. Cool thing. Right, so if it breaches here, then you can expect it to come back down here into 39.27, 39.28, and very likely we'll look for another bounce there. Yeah, let's get, and then here's another chart, the 1 hour, where is that? Right, so 1 hour chart, obviously getting exhausted here. This is US 10, and very likely if it breaches the second standard deviation here, it's going to come back down into the 5. Right now it's about 4.05. If that breaches, then the 8 is about 4.04. And then the mean reversion is all the way down here at about 4.02. I'm not sure at the moment mean reversion is going to happen, but let's see. If it comes back down and breaches 4.03, then we'll start to reassess the mean reversion, right? And let's look at DXY as well on the same time frame. Same thing, right? Second standard deviation violation coming back down. If it tests the 5, then very likely it will breach it, and we'll look for a bounce right here where the baseline, half-turn baseline is trending. Right now it's about 104.90, and if that breaches, then you can expect it to hit the 8. And if that breaches, very likely we're going to look for another bounce right about here at the 100 moving average. But more or less, if 8 breaches, then I think there is, it will start to come back down, or at least it will not move up that aggressively. And that's the downside target, and the upside target is still here, right? The weekly mean, and if that clears, then the weekly 50 moving average. Cool. And likely scenario we'll look for right here at 104.95. That seems like a decent target to the downside. If it breaches there, then we'll start to reassess for the downside for DXY. Yeah, let's get into Microsoft. Right. Microsoft mean reversion very likely today. I don't know if it happened already in the pre-market, but very likely it's going to go hit this 244.20, 244 area. Very likely, yeah, the mean reversion should happen. The regular candles are saying 244.20 area. Heikanashi is saying at about 244 area, right? So that's the range. It's going to come back down, and very likely we'll look for first bounce. And if the bounce sustains, especially if Apple starts to push up, then very likely it's going to go test this 247.80 to 47.90 area, right? And very likely it's going to clear that and probably hit that 248 area. Let's reassess if it clears this 21 on the week. Let's see here if we can find any insight. We know the MACD is still crossed down here. That we know for sure, right? So if it bounces here, right about here, then very likely it will come back up here into this line to 48.40 area, and if that breaches to the upside, then let's start to reassess to 50 area, right? And if the bounce lasts, then very likely you will see it bounce all the way up here into 250, 280, the 200 moving average basically, right? So the idea again here with moving averages is that if you bounce, if the price bounces here, based on this and based on this, then very likely the upside is if it clears the 50 EMA, then the 200 MA should act as pretty decent resistance. And to the downside, if it comes back down, then you can expect it to hit this 243.70 area. But very likely, if it starts to come back down into second standard deviation, it will breach it, very likely it'll hit this 100 moving average at about 240, 242.70, 243 area, and we'll look for another bounce here. That's to the downside. And let's go here. If we can find a trade. Right. Right? So this is exactly how it's supposed to work, and that's how exactly it is working. Oversold conditions, MFI is still oversold here, so that's where you're getting your bounce, violating the second standard deviation. Trigger RSI triggering the upside, and the 5 clears the 8 clears, we'll look for a mean 248, right? That's how it's supposed to work, and let's see what is Apple doing. Should be doing the same thing, right? If it bounces here, expect it to come back up here, then here, then here. Same thing, right? Let's get into a bit of Tesla. Tesla was a bloodbath yesterday. I was on both sides of this trade. Um, yeah, worked out pretty decent. The calls were a lost cause, but puts worked out very, very, very decent. Right, so now let's say if it comes back down here at the 8, we'll look for a bounce. I think it did come back down here and bounced. So after the market open, we'll look for a 8 bounce on the week. If that breaches, the mean reversion on the week is about 176 area, right? Almost every stock is doing the same thing, mean reversion, Apple, Microsoft, and Tesla. There's no reason for Tesla not to do that. And Tesla, the MACD is still crossed to the downside, right? And let's say if it bounces here, expect it to come back into 189.80. That clears 194.50 area. And for some reason, it starts to bounce really violently. Then again, 210 to 11. I don't think that's the case for today, but very likely we'll see a bounce here. And if it starts to breach, then I don't know. 176. I don't think it's in cards for today, but that's where it is going. The mean reversion. If the 8 gives up, then the mean reversion on the week. Let's get Tesla here. Let's get here. Come on, yeah. So the thesis here is that the MACD is still crossed to the downside, and we did not get a full cycle to the downside. So very likely, oversold conditions, overbought conditions. Next would be oversold conditions again. So we might come back. We might see Tesla come back down here into this number. I think it did come back down pre-market. I'm not sure, but we'll look for another bounce at that 185 critical number. If that breaches, expect it to come back here 180.70, and very likely 178.90. Then very likely right about here at 175.50 area. I don't think, as of now, where am I, where I'm looking at this thing, I don't think it's going to do that just yet, but let's see. And let's say if it bounces, right? This bounce would be still an ephemeral bounce. We still have MACD cross to the downside. Let's say if it bounces, then very likely it's going to go up here into 192. Then very likely it's going to hit this 193.50 area. That's a generic number, and if you are trading Tesla, I would encourage you to be on this chart here, right? Especially if the SMI crosses to the upside, then expect it to come back into the one standard deviation, or rather second standard deviation here, 188. Then the 5, that's not 5. That is, I think that's coming from the half trend baseline. That clears 189.50 clears 5, then very likely this dot, then very likely into 193.50. Let it clear the 8 to the upside, then we'll start to start to price in the mean reversion on the hour. As of now, the mean is sitting about 275. That's a hard ask, but Tesla being Tesla, you can't really rule that out. Let's say if 10 years starts to push below 4, and this thing starts to push below 104.90 area, then in a flash, Tesla will start to test the mean on the hour. Doesn't matter what, if Tesla clears this number, there's a bunch of moving averages going around here, 50, 100, 200, everything, right? So let's say about 202 to 202, well, 50, right? If Tesla comes back up and clears this number somehow, then I would, I would be surprised, and I would think that there is some serious strength to the market, and there's some serious strength to Tesla stock. That's what I would start betting again with Tesla. If it starts to clear the 8, then I'll start to bet very close to the mean again. That's the idea for the bounce. And I think if it even if it bounces, let's say all the way till here, I think it will still be shorted. I think it will get shorted here at the 8. But let's say, hypothetically, let's say if it goes all the way up here at the 50 100 on the 1 hour, I think it will get shorted again. Cool. Uh, Anything else in particular? Let's see what the chart chat is saying. Hello everyone. How are you? Move back right about Darth with too much in your. Yeah, I did not actually eat anything. Uh, by the way, it's not dinner time yet here. Blackstone defaults on 31 this after property sales delayed. Even with DXY dropping a bit, isn't more than up enough. I think we should see a small up. Okay. I'm ready for March 24. All right, cool. All right. I'm gonna go grab some snack. I'm really hungry. Right. You guys carry on in the live trading, and I'll join you in a bit.